Bonjour, les amis. Welcome to Generate Her podcast. And today we have a very special guest. We are with Jessie Kanelos Weiner, who is a bilingual artist illustrator who's been living in Paris for over 15 years. And she's been illustrating for a wide variety of clients. Her signature watercolor style has been commissioned from everyone from luxury houses like Cartier, People, Fragonard. She's been working with food brands, from Nespresso to El Alatab. And then, of course, those beautiful editorials we know of, Vogue, The New Yorker, T-Mag. And most exciting, she has a new book coming out, Thinking in Watercolor, a daily practice to unlock your creativity and discover your inner artist. That is being released this March. So I'm so excited to have Jessie with us. She's a multi-talented professional, including being a comedian. So we're going to talk about all sorts of things. Welcome to Generate Her. I'm Jane Bertch. I spent the first half of my life working in a corporate organization, and then I decided to trade that all in to become an entrepreneur. Yes, here in your favorite city of Paris, France. And today, I hope I'm a guide on your journey to personal reinvention and transformation. Jessie, I'm so thrilled to have you with me.
Thank you, Jane, for having me. It's always fun chatting with you.
It's really a pleasure. So tell me a bit about your Paris story. How did you get here?
Yes. So, I always kind of knew I was an artist and I would have to kind of find my own path in this world. And, I think when you're an artist, sometimes you're like, okay, I know I want to do this, but how in the world am I ever going to make this work? So I've always kind of felt like, I don't come from crazy means. I have a very supportive family, but otherwise I felt like I really just kind of had to open myself to this life, to this universe, and just try to find opportunities when they come to me. So I studied theater and studio art at Denison University. I'm from Chicago, like you.
Yes, so, Chicago, represent.
Yes. And I had a year before I had to pay off my student loans, and a lot of my friends were going to grad school or they were getting jobs on Wall Street and all this stuff. But I just thought, you know what? I feel in my heart that this is my time to live abroad, to travel, to just kind of see how this goes. I felt like, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so I found a job as a jeune fille au pair or a nanny online. And in a couple of weeks, I was in Paris with my giant suitcase and my Eiffel Tower journal. And I remember opening my aunt gave me this Eiffel Tower journal. And I remember being on the plane and opening the cover to the very first page. And I had my pen and I was like, okay.
Do you still have that journal?
Oh, yeah. It's embarrassing, but I have it. Okay. But even on the first page, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm on this journey and this is the first page of the rest of my life. It would, not to be dramatic, but it felt very much like, I had no idea what that year would how it would pan out, but I did it and I'm still here. So it had some kind of lasting impact on me.
Excellent. And then since then, wow, what a career you've had.
Well, thank you. It didn't happen overnight, that's for sure. But when I first moved to Paris, I was, a young person, 22. I just moved from, my very well-financed liberal arts school to Paris, where I was literally nobody. I was making 300 euros a month. I had an Nespresso allotment of one a day. I just felt like this place everything was built against me. I just felt like, yes, it was great. I was walking around. I was trying to meet people, but it just felt so foreign. I didn't speak French. It just felt completely impossible to me and impossible to imagine myself being here for longer than that 1 year. But little by little, I was able to there are a few pivots in my life, but I think meeting my husband, who's a photographer, was a big step because I never really met a real artist before who was living and being commissioned and whatnot. When we met at a bar and he told me he was a photographer, and I was like, right. Aren't we all?
Right.
But then little by little, I saw that, he was publishing books and working with major clients. And so he actually pushed me to start a career in illustration, because when I moved to France indefinitely, I'd say in 2011, I started a blog like we all did back in the day, where I shared about my life in Paris, about, moving to this foreign country and, the faux pas and putting my foot in the mouth and all that stuff. And he said, oh, your drawings are really good. You should add illustrations. I was like, oh, I don't know. And so it really was a catalyst where I had an idea. I had my own words, finding a visual that spoke of the words, And for me, something just really clicked. I always liked drawing. I didn't know what to draw, but I just think it was very empowering, finding my voice, sharing it, people responding to it, and creating a visual too. So I think my new book kind of goes back to that first moment where something really clicked and I felt like I was doing something that made sense.
Fabulous. Fabulous. I love that. So it sounds like you let your intuition with a bit of magic from the universe help guide you in the right way.
I think so. I feel like there are moments in life where, it's literally a crossroads where you're like, okay,
Exactly.
am I going to, I have no idea how this is going to pan out, but I feel like this is the right choice. And regardless of the choice you make, you have to kind of manifest that, I had to manifest even, I was living in New York before I moved here indefinitely. And I really had to make that decision. I'm moving here. I'm committing. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to make my life here and hopefully it'll be interesting, but I had many years that I felt lost or like I was wasting my time or I had no direction in life. And, you talk to your friends back home and they all have, are married and have kids and jobs and are buying things. And you're just like, okay.
Right.
So it just took some time.
Yeah. It took time and faith. Faith is belief in the things not yet seen.
Exactly.
So, so one thing I really want to talk to you about,
yes,
Jessie, you are my reference when it comes to creativity.
Oh, thank you.
You're so talented at being able to express yourself and creativity. One, I think we're all creative and we show it in different ways. And, you only need to look at children to see the creativity we have in us at one point that we toned down over the years. But creativity is so important to me because I have a strong belief it's got such a high correlation with confidence. And I say that because as a person who's constantly trying to evolve myself, trying to evolve my business, if I don't feel creative, I'm not able to imagine myself in another way. I'm not able to reimagine my business. I'm not able to reimagine the world around me to take action on anything. So I think in the absence of those, then my confidence drops. So it's this vicious circle. So I think creativity is just such a wonderful thing for all of us to harness. And I imagine even as an artist, you go through moments where you're not feeling creative or inspired. How do you get yourself out of that? What are your tools that you do to get your creative juices flowing?
Oh man, you should have asked me at the beginning of this week. This week was a total disaster.
Which we all have. We all have those weeks that we think, okay, let's pack it all up and not come out for a while.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, I feel like I don't want this to sound, like conceited, but I feel like I've been gifted in this life with with this creativity that I just never really understood until, a couple of years ago. But I feel like I'm inherently creative. It's just everything I do has the Jessie touch. I cook, I sing, I dance. Oh, I kind of dance, but I feel like even in those early years of Paris, sometimes I would, whip out a little stuffed animal out of a sock and people are like, wow, oh my God, how did you know how to do that? And I kind of always thought these things just come easy to me too. And I think that's always kind of a telling sign of, what kind of job you should do later on in life is that thing that you just are inherently good at. So, I think creativity for me is, practicing what I do. And then also, there's a Chuck Close quote that says, amateurs need inspiration, but professionals stay inspired, or something like this too, where it's just, I think it's oftentimes not working that I find inspiration. So either that means resting, or it means walking, or doing cardio, or reading, talking to friends. I feel like that's a big source of energy too, is just bouncing ideas off of other people and not just being isolated as well. And so I think it's this, it depends on the season as well. I think, as women, we live in cycles. Can't really preach about that so much, but I feel like there are cycles where I kind of feel like I need to hibernate and rest, and others where I feel like ideas are developing and I can pitch stuff and I feel a little bit more fertile in that way. I think it's just kind of accepting that some days you just don't want to do what you need to do and you want to work on something else. Or if you're inspired to do something in particular, if you feel like lightning has struck and you need to seize the day, then it's always important to make a little bit of time for those really pressing ideas. So it's a flux, I think.
But you know what? You touched on some interesting points that I think are just important to summarize, because for me, they're very useful. You talked about physical activity, getting out and just getting that fresh breath of air, pumping those lungs, getting your blood flowing. That's very important. You talked about community and diversity of that community, surrounding yourself by people who have different interests, which I imagine challenges you to see things in a different way, which then perhaps stimulates your creativity. And you talked about making time for it. And when it strikes, to honor it and sit with it. Tell me about that.
I know you're a fan of Big Magic, and Elizabeth Gilbert's book about that. And that's the first time I really heard that analogy of this almost godlike force that is creativity. It strikes and something clicks and you're just like, oh my gosh, I have to do something about this. Either I need to leave myself a voice message, or I need to do a sketch or something like this. What was the question? I'm sorry, I just blanked.
So I want to hear, do things come to you? Are you the type of creative that says, okay, between 2 to 5 p.m., I'm going to create?
Making time for it. It really depends on what I'm doing. I feel like I kind of have a rhythm in place now where I wake up, I take care of my son, take him to school, and then I run around the block a couple times just to get my blood flowing. And then I take my computer and I work at the neighborhood cafe, which I really like working at just on my computer if I'm writing or if I'm emailing or working on, Photoshop and touching up some drawings, for example. And then usually the afternoon I come here to my studio, and that's where I paint, where I make a mess, where maybe I'm on my computer, but it's just more of like a sacred space where I'm free to be messy and I can just focus on the work that I'm doing at hand. So it really depends. This afternoon I should have been working on a project that I need to turn in soon, but instead I was inspired to do some sketches that took a few hours more than expected. But
Fabulous. But
it's being a working artist too. It's always that balance between commission work and, doing the thing that you really want to do and the thing that you don't have time for necessarily as well. But the moments where I can actually sit down and paint are rare. So I made that for myself today. I'm still punishing myself, but it'll pass.
That's okay. You've been naughty. But you mentioned a word that struck me, and I'm sitting with it. You said, allow yourself to get messy. And I think one of the things that holds me back, and I wonder if it holds back some of our listeners, is when we're pursuing something, particularly maybe in a creative endeavor that others will see, there's a fear of it needs to be perfect. It needs to be beautiful. So talk to me about how often are you messy and how much is messy helping you to be creative?
Do you want to see what's behind me?
Yes, of course I do. Of course I do. It's like, yeah, let's see everything.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So this is my desk.
I love it.
It's just like,
it's like a Willy Wonka of beautiful paper.
It's like Paris after an earthquake. But there's a lot of talk about this now where, tidiness is, close to godliness, and either artist studios are super clean and pristine, or they look a lot like this where it's just, this is an after effect of the creation too. And so luckily my studio, I shared the studio with a few people, and I'm always just like, is this all right? Because I'm just going to keep going, But I think it really depends. I think for me, it's just, tapping into escapism or just really focusing on the work, and everything else doesn't really matter at that point. And if it means I'm going to have to sweep the floor every day, that's fine by me too. And it's nice having a space too outside of your living space where you can make those kinds of messes. So I'm kind of embracing it as a sign of the process, because I don't think it just happens like that. I think it's, the passage of time. It's doing 10 different projects, and finally you see that one has some potential, and then you do the next version of it. So I think of making art now more like drafts and, sketches and revisions. And then, maybe you'll make one good piece a year. But other than that, you just really have to put in the time to get better, and then kind of know what's working and what's not.
Right. Right. And I think evolution is so important in anything that we're doing. And for listeners that don't know, besides Jessie and I having the good old Chicago Midwestern sensibility connection, Jessie is also the fabulous person that designed the cover of my book. And what I was most intrigued by were seeing your early sketches of how you went through the ideas to create this thing that is so rich and important to me. And speaking of books, I want to talk a bit about your new book. What inspired you to go down this path of creating a daily practice for others?
Yes, I think I really was looking back at those early years where I started this blog. I knew I wanted to be an artist, but I hadn't yet figured out that thing, that, that point of view, that way to kind of focus my time and my minimal talents to just do the work. And so I thought a lot about, moving to Paris as an immigrant, not knowing the language, not knowing anything, and being completely humbled by the experience and looking around. And I think, being in a new place, feeling like nobody, opened your eyes up so much to the world around you. And that's when I started really drawing and finding that voice. And so the book itself, I think something's in the air right now. I hope that, people want to know watercolor. I had a nice message earlier from a friend. I sent her the PDF of the book. She might be writing about it. And she's like, this is the book that I need. I've always liked watercolor, but I just couldn't figure it out. But I feel like if you have an idea of a few techniques and good materials and, some prompts, I think it'll really help people a lot to just really focus on it and not be intimidated and understand it on a deeper level. And it's not prescriptive like a lot of watercolor books, which are great, but it's more about, copying botanicals or Google image pleasantries. But this is really about finding your own voice while using watercolor. So I think there's something in it for everybody. If you're a novice watercolorist, you'll learn a lot about watercolor. If you know a little bit about watercolor already, then hopefully the exercises in the book will help you create work that might be a little bit deeper and speak more of who you are. So I always like to say, start where you are. You are your own best primary reference or resource. And so just really look within, because sure, you can imagine, I don't know, life on the moon or whatever, but I mean, your experience better than anybody, and just start there, because that's how I started. And I think it's just the easiest thing to access.
Absolutely. Start where you are. Start where you are. And you said something again that kind of makes me tingle. One, I want to talk about differences and how your differences have been a benefit for you here in France. What I'd love to also talk about is, you mentioned when you got here, your differences and trying to find yourself in France. And I've come to appreciate later in life, after a few painful episodes, that actually my differences have been the most wonderful thing about me in creating my life here. But I'd like to hear your story in that case.
Yes. I mean, I think when you're younger, you have a little less grace for yourself, but I think,
yes.
I mean, talking to you now, I feel like humor has been a way that I've been able to kind of, process the difficult moments and, spin everything on its head, and just trying to come through the whole experience with empathy. I think it's, to be a foreigner, you really have to kind of erase any sense of who you were before. I believe, it's easy to gentrify Paris to become, this expat haven. And some people do that, and that's fine. There's no judgment on their parts. But I think there's just a real learning gap too, between learning the language, knowing the culture, and then finding yourself amongst all of it as well. So I don't know how I've done it. I mean, I think I'm just putting two and two together now, but I think humor, just being able to joke about myself, to, joke with other people. And then also as expats too, when you meet new people, you always retell the same script over and over again. So it's just kind of finding the ease in the language like that. I mean, as an artist too, I've learned through time that, I'm super sensitive, hypersensitive, and just learning a little bit more about why that is and how it impacts the rest of my life. So I think because of the work that I do, is because of that as well. And so not everybody can do the work I do, and not everybody is as sensitive as I am, but it's kind of about self-preservation, knowing what works for me. yeah, I think I'm on some kind of, I'm not bipolar, but I feel like I'm a deeply feeling person where I'm not the high, I'm not the low, I'm the movement, between high and low at all times. And so, I mean, I think it's good to know that, and it's good to find yourself, representation matters, and I'm able to roll with the punches a little bit. But I think it's not always easy navigating your emotions and your family life and your creativity, but I do the best I can.
Yeah. And then navigating France, if I can add,
Yes.
and I wonder if this has been your experience when I talk about differences, everything here is so, in a beautiful way, as we say, no judgment, but there's lots of cultural codes.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of way things are done.
Yes.
And certainly way things are not done. And there's the art of the presentation and the introduction and, having a reference, somebody who has helped to open the door for you. And I didn't have those.
Mm.
So I had to dare to open the door myself and poke my head in and say, hello, I'm Jane. And understanding later that those were not done. I was released myself and able to do it because I'm a foreigner.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
so I imagine you had those same experiences. You probably picked up the phone, you made those phone calls when other people wouldn't dare.
It seems very quaint, looking at it now. But yeah, when I kind of knew I wanted to be an illustrator, I went to the magazine stand and I bought all of the magazines with illustrations. And I circled the names of the art directors and I just picked up the phone and I was like, hey, my name's Jessie, and automatically they knew that I was not Apolline, I was Jessie. And I think, I don't think I would have had the guts to do that now, but at the time I've always felt like if, people don't know who I am, then nobody's going to call me. So that's really how it started. And I mean, sometimes if it's frustrating, I say like, okay, if I'm frustrated by all of the rules, I just say French people are robots and they're just repeating the script. That's all that they know. And I am able to break the rules if I want to, or I'm able to not feel like I have to do things in that specific way. So I think that's a good thing,
absolutely. Just having freedom to break the rules a little.
Yes, and maybe not knowing them, but you learn that later on.
Exactly. And sometimes I still break the rules, even though I know, I shouldn't be doing this. But, again, I think it's a message for people that your differences can be your secret sauce.
Oh, of course. I definitely think that's it,
Yeah.
Even, I'm a self-taught watercolorist too. And I've been in appointments or, shown my work to people and they're like, oh, I can definitely tell you're self-taught. And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? But I think because I don't have the academic training, I learned French on my own. I don't know academic French. But I think part of it too is like, once you realize that you don't need to know everything perfectly. I think there's a lot of people are afraid to just try speaking French because they think they need to know the future subjunctive and all this. Honestly, like I learned French on my own. I get on fine. I feel insecure sometimes, but you don't need to know everything perfectly. It's just a matter of practicing and putting together the pieces.
Exactly. Having the courage not to take some big monumental step, but just to move one little inch forward. Being curious. Being curious has been a big driver for me. When I didn't have the courage to do something, I was probably more curious. And that's what led me forward. I'm just saying sometimes like, I don't know. I don't know. Exactly.
I have no idea.
Exactly. So Jessie, you mentioned a bit earlier about the things that have influenced you and stimulated you. And I wanted to talk a bit about people that have influenced you. And I'm not talking about influencers. That's a very troubled word for me now. I'm talking about those that have influenced you positively, those that have been role models. Who have they been and what have they done for you?
I mean, I think, there are many people who helped me out along the way, and I'm very thankful for those people in my lives. I'm just thinking of when I was in high school, there was an English teacher. I had to take freshman English as a senior, so I was already kind of, big fish in a small pond. And it was senior year, and my parents just told me that they didn't have any money for me to go to college. And I was like, okay, I have no idea how I'm going to make this happen for myself. And so there was an Air Force recruiter who came to our school and was telling me about the Air Force. And I was thinking, wow, I want to travel. I want to I want to get away from home. This could be a perfect option. And I was telling this teacher about it, and she was like, Jessie, are you crazy? You would last like 10 seconds. This is a terrible idea. And she's like, you could do anything. You could write for TV. You could, I don't know, you could do anything you wanted. You could, and she told me that you could write for TV. And at the time I was like, you think so? I'm funny? Like I never even considered that before. And so, I mean, I've seen a few of these little things on my path. And I think, sometimes people see things in you that you don't see in yourselves. And I'm thankful for that too, because I could have been in the Air Force for all that I know. And that would have been terrible. That's like the worst idea ever. Yeah. So, and then I think, I don't know if it's just how I grew up. I grew up in an evangelical Christian home, which was fine, but I just didn't have a lot of female role models, women who went into higher education or who had big careers. And so that came later on too, when I was in college, and I had mentors there, and just kind of seeing what my potential could be, and having an idea of, maybe I could move to New York and I could work at a magazine, or I could, do all of these various things. I took a fashion illustration course. I lived in London, and I had a professor who was like, you could be a fashion illustrator. And I was like, I have no idea what that means, and I wish I would have, decided to listen to her earlier, because I made a few mistakes, and I could have avoided going to grad school for an unsuccessful semester. But, sometimes you just have to live your life and piece it together afterwards. But
absolutely,
I'm thankful for those moments and those people who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, or would never even thought of doing before. So,
I think that's so important. It's a message to all of us who are at any point in our career, but certainly those that are a bit more mature and have had a few years beyond them, to see that spark in somebody and share it with them and let them imagine this new version of themselves that they would have never thought of. And I've benefited from that, and it changed my trajectory. So I'm forever grateful for those people that said, you know what, I see this in you, and maybe you should go look at it. And I didn't even know it existed. So, it just makes this wonderful sphere of creativity. It's almost not a yin and yang. That's a bad example, but them telling me that fed my curiosity and my creativity to go check this thing out. And then I realized, actually, that is what I want to do. And I hope to give that to others. It's such a rich thing.
Yes, I've started teaching the past couple of years, and I try to do that. I don't just do it just because, but if I really feel like I see something in someone that they don't see or they never thought about, I try to share that, because I think that's the circle of life too. When you
Absolutely
feel like you're not an elder statesperson, but if you have some authority.
I hope not yet. Not yet, please. I'm
only 38, close. But just to say, like, listen, I see this in you, keep in touch. Here's my email address. People, students rarely reach out to me now, but I mean it. Like, if you give something to someone and they appreciate it, I think it's normal to keep giving back and nourishing those relationships as well. And I drop lines to my mentors every now and then, and sometimes they respond and sometimes don't, and it's fine. But it's just more about, thanking them too, and saying, thank you for opening my mind and my spirit, and investing in me, and maybe giving me a B when I thought I deserved an A, but then I realized, I wasn't pushing hard enough. So I think it's all good.
Yeah. I mean, if we think of ourselves as these little, I like to think, I love the term, if I'm going to use an art form, mosaics, because they are these little chips of broken pieces, which we all are. Hopefully some are beautiful, some are dark. And you put it together and you get this beautiful picture of somebody. And I think every time somebody has influenced me, like the way you mentioned, that person that sees something in you or encourages you or nudges you forward, they're a part of my mosaic. I take them on forever. It's thanks to them that I'm a new version of myself. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love talking about role models. And, those are the future vision of you. That's your psychological view of your future self. Definitely. So having those people around you constantly at any age.
Yes.
So important.
Yeah, I think being generous too and saying, I've been through some experiences that were probably not favorable for me, but what did I actually learn from that? And how can I share that with other people so that they can create stronger work? Or maybe you're saying, I have a friend now who's like, you should reach out to this person because you never know, So I think, being courageous with yourself and then also with your friends, they can tell you to shut up if they need to.
Yes.
But just,
absolutely.
Just continue sharing that light and that, that, I don't know, maybe delusion is not the word, but just keep pushing forward and
absolutely
for your community as well. And just don't keep everything to yourself.
Absolutely. So speaking of sharing that light, the last thing I'm going to end on is your new book. Do you have it there so you can hold it up so we can see it? I'm so excited about this, Jessie. It's a beautiful book. It's going to be coming out the first part of March, right?
March 4th, it comes out with Artisan Books. And
Excellent.
If you pre-order, you'll receive a 15-minute watercolor course with me that I filmed in my studio. And I designed it so that when you get the book on March 4th, you're ready to go. So you have an idea of the supplies you need, some basic techniques, and a little bit more about watercolor and, some things to keep in mind before you really start doing the work. So I'm going to put on my glasses so I can look like you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited about that. And I know that you have watercolor retreats yourself here in Paris from time to time.
I do, yes. I haven't set the date, but I would like to do another one probably in May of this year, much like last year. So keep in touch because that'll probably be announced sometime soon.
Fabulous. And speaking of retreats, I'm just so pleased that Jessie is going to be one of my creative workshops on my retreat happening in March. And I know the ladies are absolutely going to love it. It's going to be superb.
Yeah, I think watercolor is important in this time of history just because it gives you escapism. And then, there's nothing more that binds us like water itself, not to sound too poetic, but I just think that there's something about the passage of time and embracing the present moment and just really seizing out beauty when possible. So
absolutely.
I think it'll resonate with people.
And then being able to express ourselves, which is so important.
And tell your story, maybe rewrite it, maybe,
you can always rewrite it. Absolutely.
Exactly. So that's my goal.
Well, Jessie, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to have you,
so much, Jane,
with me today. And I can't wait to share this with my listeners. And all of you can find Jessie. She's on Instagram. She has a website, and we'll link to all of that in our show notes. And do not forget to pre-order her book because then you can attend her very special 15-minute water class.
Yes. And I have a Substack as well where I want to write about watercolor and things related to Paris, creativity, the book, et cetera, et cetera. So
fabulous.
Fabulous.
Well, thanks everyone. And thank you, Jessie. And I will see all of you soon.